Hello, I'm North Hempstead Town Supervisor Judy Bosworth, and I, along with our town board, are proud to present At Home with North Hempstead, a series of special programs for children, seniors, as well as entertainment for residents of all ages. We hope you enjoy this special presentation and check back often for new content.
Hi, welcome to the Science Museum of Long Island's Animal Adaptation Program. I'm Miss Natasha, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the mammals we have living here at the Science Museum. Today we're going to be learning about some of the mammals here at the Science Museum. All mammals have about 4 traits that they share with one another. So the first one is hair, or an adapted type of fur. We have warm blood. They also produce live offspring, and they produce milk for their offspring as well. All right, guys, so one of the mammals we're meeting today is Linus. So Linus here is a ferret, and ferrets get their name from the Latin word for little thief. So the reason we call them little thieves is because often they will burrow into other animals' tunnels and take the tunnel for their own home, as well as steal anything that might be inside. These guys can live anywhere from 5 to 10 years, depending on if they're in the wild or in captivity. In the wild, they can be found all over the world. Weasels and ferrets can be found in most forests, places like that. They can also be found in some colder climates as well, depending on the species. These guys are carnivores, so they spend most of their time hunting for other small mammals. They will eat eggs. They have a very similar diet to your cat at home. The cool thing about these guys is they're crepuscular. So we are diurnal, which means we're awake during the day, and animals that are awake during night are nocturnal. But these guys are only awake during dawn and dusk, and that's when they do most of their hunting. The other 20 hours of the day they spend sleeping. So these guys can be pretty sleepy most of the time, but when they're awake, they have tons of energy. So another cool feature of these guys, I mentioned how they squeeze into other animals' tunnels. How they're able to do this is they have an extremely flexible spine that allows them to kind of wiggle and sneak into all sorts of places. Something else these guys have as an adaptation is something called musk. So if you had smell-o-vision, you'd be able to smell Linus right now, and he's a little bit stinky, but it's not because he's dirty. This musk is really important. It helps them communicate with other ferrets, like marking their territory or just letting them know someone's there, as well as keeping predators away, because most predators don't really like the smell of these guys. So that's Linus here. He does have a sister named Lucy, who's another ferret, but they spend most of their time just sleeping and cuddling with each other. All right, guys, another mammal here. This is Salt the chinchilla. So chinchillas get their name from the native Chincha people of South America. So Salt here can live approximately 10 years, a little bit longer in captivity. Her natural habitat is the Andes Mountains of South America. So in the mountains, it can be super duper cold, and that's why Salt is also known as one of the softest animals in the world. To stay warm in this very cold climate, she has lots of super duper fine hairs. So for about every 1 hair we have on our head, she has about 400. So these hairs keep her nice and warm, but because of these hairs, she can actually never get her fur wet. Because if she does, she could accidentally freeze, which is no good. So Salt here does something a little different. She takes what is known as dust baths, or in the Andes Mountains, she would actually roll around in volcanic ash. So she rolls around in this ash, which might seem like a silly way to get clean, but for her, because her hairs are so fine, she rolls around and knocks out any big clumps of dirt, maybe any insects or parasites that might be crawling around making her itchy, and this is the best way for her to keep her beautiful fluffy fur nice and clean. So she is an herbivore, which means she eats only fruits and veggies, so no meat for her. She is nocturnal, so she comes out mostly at night to look around and forage for any of these fruits and veggies. She loves leafy greens, she'll eat flowers like dandelions, and her favorite fruit is strawberries. So she comes out at night, she'll go hunting around, and living in the mountains means you need to be able to move pretty well. Luckily for us, Salt doesn't know she can do this, but chinchillas in the wild can jump anywhere from 5 to 6 feet. This helps them move from cliffside to cliffside or jump from rock to rock, and this is a good way to move around the large area as well as escape from any predators that might be coming around. Because they have such soft fur, they were endangered for a little while because people would use their fur to make fur coats. Luckily, they are protected now, so we don't have to worry too much about them. They make really great pets. They're super cute and fuzzy. They are related to other animals like mice and gerbils. So you might have seen her nibbling on this basket a little. That's because their front teeth never stop growing. So they need to constantly gnaw on things and wear it down in order to prevent them from growing too big. So that's Salt here, our softest animal in the world. All right, guys, another mammal here is Charlie the Hedgehog. So hedgehogs get their name because they can be found sniffing around with their little pig-like nose in different bushes and hedges. So these guys are native to Europe. They can be found all over the continent. We can find them all over the world now because they are very popular as pets, but they are native to Europe. They're friend to most gardeners, especially in England, where they can be found just like we have squirrels here in the United States, because they will take care of all the pests that gardeners are worried about, like different worms and insects. So Charlie here is an insectivore, which means he spends most of his time eating mainly bugs and insects. They can be found eating different berries and leafy vegetables, but for the most part, that's just a treat. So Charlie here is nocturnal. He comes out at night and sleeps during the day. He comes out at night mainly to hunt for any different insects because there are also no predators out during this time as well. So his eyesight isn't so good, so he mainly uses his nose to sniff around for these things. So we can see that Charlie here has some pretty cool adaptations, unlike some other mammals. He does have regular hairs, but the quills on his back are also modified hairs. These quills are hollow, they're not poisonous or venomous, and he can't shoot them out like a porcupine. But if a predator gets close and he gets a little bit nervous, he'll curl up in a ball, protecting that soft little belly, and all these spikes will stick out, and it'll definitely scare any predators away. They do build burrows. They will live in little underground tunnels. And when they sleep at night, they do sleep curled up in a ball with their spikes out. That way, even if a predator is nearby and they don't see them, they will be protected no matter what. Another little cute fact about hedgehogs is because their quills are hollow, they are able to float around in water. And baby hedgehogs are known as hoglets. So that's Charlie, our little hedgehog.
Hi everyone, my name is Mr. Hoos. I'll be getting into the reptile portion of today's video. Before we meet some of the reptiles here at the museum, let's take a minute to kind of understand what all reptiles have in common. Reptiles are a large group of animals that includes lizards, snakes, turtles, tortoises, among other species. And they all have three main traits in common. They all have scales covering their body, unlike hair and fur, like in the mammals that you saw earlier. They all are laid from eggs, unlike the live birth from the mammals again. And they're all cold-blooded, which is perhaps their biggest difference than the mammals. Mammals are warm-blooded, of course. They're able to regulate their body temperature internally using processes in their body, such as sweating when they get too hot. When you sweat, the sweat leaves your body and evaporates, and that cools your body down. That's an endothermic reaction. We also shiver when we're cold, and that's able to warm us up by generating heat within our bodies. Reptiles are unable to do that. You'll never see a lizard sweat or shiver. Instead, to regulate their body temperature, they rely on their environment. So they either go into the sun when they're too cold, or they might seek some shade when they're too hot. And their body temperature is a direct result of the environment that they're in. So now that we have some knowledge about reptiles under our belt, let's get into some of the ones we have here at the museum. All right, here we have Shadow, who is our crested gecko. These are lizards that are native to Southeast Asia, where they live in the jungle. And because they live in a very different environment, they have a lot of different adaptations that other lizards don't have. They have much smoother, softer skin. I think you can see that there. And they have very sticky fingers and toes that are paper thin. and that helps them cling on to branches and trees so that they can find food. These guys almost exclusively eat fruit. Occasionally they will eat some insects, but it is mostly fruit that they find on the rainforest floor, the jungle floor, excuse me, or up in the trees. And because they spend a lot of time climbing, they are arboreal creatures. They like to live in vertical tree environments. They have a lot of ways to help them climb better. So they have these sticky fingers, like I mentioned. They have a prehensile tail, which can cling onto any twig or branch that they find. And they are great jumpers. So if you see here, they can jump very well. Let's see if they'll jump for you guys. There you go. And that's how they're able to go from branch to branch. They do most of their foraging at dawn and dusk. They are crepuscular. So that means they sleep during the day where most predators are out, and then they go out and look for fruit dawn and dusk. So that's going to do it for our crested gecko friend here, and let's move on to our next reptile. Okay, here we have Gonzo, our bearded dragon. These are animals that are original to Australia, but have since made their way all around the world because they make really good pets. They're very docile. They are very calm and pretty easy to take care of, and they're pretty smart for lizards as well. They get their name from this pouch underneath their chin here, which kind of looks like a beard, and it looks more like a beard when they puff it up. They can inflate it, and they do that to either intimidate rival males or scare them away from their favorite basking spot, or to scare away potential predators. So these guys are very long. Their tail makes up about half of their total length, and it's very useful when they're running. They can run up to 9 miles an hour, which is pretty fast for a lizard, especially one with such small legs, and their tail helps them balance as they run and jump through the Australian outback. They are basking creatures, which means they really like to find a perfect spot to absorb as much sunlight as they can to get their bodies nice and warm. They can get up to about 105 degrees Fahrenheit for their internal body temperature. And to do that, they have to find the right amount of sun. And they can also adjust the color of their body to make sure they get the most amount of heat they can as quickly as possible. So you'll see this guy right now is about a pale yellow. He's at an appropriate temperature for him. If he were on the cooler side, he could actually change his body to be a much darker brown or even black. And that's going to help him absorb more light. Similar to if you're wearing a black shirt on a sunny day, you might get a little hotter than if you wore a white shirt, which reflects a lot more heat. They are omnivores, which means they eat all foods. This guy usually eats greens and vegetables and fruits with the occasional insect treat. When he was a baby, he was only about the size of my finger. That was just a couple years ago. They would only exclusively eat insects like crickets and superworms, but as they grow older, they incorporate fruits and vegetables into their diets as well. Some other cool adaptations they have here. They have these unique ears that help them hear while blocking out dust and dirt around them. They have these soft spikes that go all across their body, and they have very long toes that help them grasp branches and other things that they may hold onto. All right, so that's it for our bearded dragon Gonzo, and let's move on to our next animal. All right, here we have Pretzel, who is a ball python. These are snakes that originate in Central and Western Africa, and they live about 30 years. They get their names from the ball shape that they curl into, whether when they're resting or hiding from predators. As you can see here, they have really nice camouflage on their skin. They live in the rainforest in Africa, so they blend in very well to the rainforest floor. And above them, or below them, I should say, on their bellies, they have counter shading, which means they're lighter on the bottom. So if they are up in the branches, they can camouflage with the sunlight coming down. These guys have a few senses that are very stifled. They don't have ears, so they can't hear in the traditional way that we can. And their eyesight is very poor as well. And they make up for both of that with their tongues. So if you look at her tongue here, she should be flicking it out pretty frequently. And this is how they get a sense of the world around them. They pick up on vibrations and smells with their tongue, and that's how they're able to get a sense of what's going on. They have a very keen sense of smell with their tongues, but not with their noses. Their noses are used exclusively for breathing. These guys are also carnivorous, so they only eat meat. And what a snake eats is determined by how large it is. So here we have about a medium thickness of a snake. So she would eat rats. When she was younger and much thinner, she ate mice, and some larger snakes would eat even rabbits or chickens. So she eats rats, she swallows them whole, and she constricts them. So pythons are usually constrictors. So she doesn't use venom or anything like that. She uses a constriction process once she's caught the rat with her fangs. Once that is completed, she does a very cool thing with her jaw here. So snakes have unhingeable jaws. So unlike us, our jaws are attached to our skulls here and here, and we can kind of use that hinge to open and close. They're able to unhinge their jaws and stretch their mouths over the entire prey and swallow it whole that way, so they don't chew their food at all. And just to give you an idea of how why they're able to do that, the same ratio for us, if we were able to unhinge our jaws, we'd be able to swallow a basketball. So pretty crazy. Another neat thing they have, an adaptation here on their belly, are these scuts. And what these are little ladder-like scales that help them grip the floor. Of course, snakes slither when they move, and without these scuts, they wouldn't be able to get the friction they need to move forward. So if we were to place her on a frictionless surface, for example, like an ice rink or silk sheets or something like that, she wouldn't be able to push off, so she would kind of just slither in place like a treadmill. And we'll give you a nice long look at her. She has a very flexible spine, and that's due to the lot of ribs that they have. So they have ribs pretty much throughout their whole body, going from the beginning of their neck at the very top all the way through their tails. And they also have a very long stomach to digest the whole prey that they swallow. That starts about here, and it goes all the way through about here. People always ask us if snakes poop, and of course they do. All animals poop in some way, and they have a hole at the bottom of their tail called a cloaca, and that's kind of their all-in-one hole. It's where they also lay their eggs and some other stuff. So that's about it for our snake Pretzel here, and let's move on to another animal. All right, here we have Crush, our red-eared slider. These turtles, or terrapins, which are turtles that spend most of their lives in the water, they get their names from the markings right behind their eyes. They have red markings. Sometimes they can be a little orange as well. As Crush kind of lifts his head out to say hi, you'll see those markings a little clearer. That's what they're named after. These are one of the most common turtles as pets in the whole world, and they're also one of the most invasive species in the whole world. They're constantly released by pet owners who perhaps didn't know what they were getting themselves into, and so they've made their way around the world, and they're actually in the list of the top 100 most invasive species in the whole world as well. They're also the inspiration for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who are based on the red-eared sliders. The show and the comics originally were kind of inspired by what would happen if one of those released turtles got into the sewers and found some radioactive stuff. So that's a fun little fact about that. These guys are omnivores, so they eat pretty much anything they can find. Ours have mostly a plant-based diet. As they mature, they become more herbivorous. But when they're younger, they eat lots of insects, fish, shrimp. Some of that stuff he still eats as a supplement, but for the most part, they are herbivores at this point. They originate from the southern region of the United States, so around Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico. They love warm waters that are still, so they like to spend most of their time in swamps, predominantly under the water, and then occasionally coming up to bask in the hot sun for warmth. Like our other reptiles, they are cold-blooded. They have a beautiful shell, as you can see here, made up of multiple sections. The shell grows as they grow through a process called molting. So as they get bigger and bigger, these panels here, these are called scutes. They look like they shed off, they peel off, and underneath that makes room for the bigger scutes that are below. So that's how they grow. They kind of grow all at once, and they molt the previous pieces of the shell as the new ones come in. Like a lot of shells, this is made out of keratin as well. It's the same stuff that your fingernails are made out of. And unlike a hermit crab or something like that, the shell is a part of their body. They're born with it. It's attached to their spine around here and here. If we look a little closer at the skin, you'll see their skin has some really nice camouflage there. And that's going to help them when they swim underwater in the swampy water, along with their shell. Like another animal we've mentioned, they also have counter shading. So if they're on top of the land, they blend in with the shrubbery and the green. Whereas if they're swimming underwater and something is looking up, this lighter color helps them hide from predators from below. That's going to make them kind of look more like the light water coming in from the top. If we get a close look at their flippers here, I'll try to get a nice shot for you guys. If we get a close look, you'll see they have webbed arms and feet. And if you've ever taken swimming lessons, you know that you're supposed to cup your hands when you swim. These guys do that naturally. They're very, very fast swimmers, and they're pretty quick on land too, much faster than you might think. They live about 80 years in the wild. They can live a very long time. In captivity, it's much less, it's about 20 to 40 years, which is a big part of why they're unfortunately dropped off by people all over the place. People pick them up as pets when they're very small. You can get them very cheap at multiple pet shops, and then eventually they get much bigger and people think they can just leave them outside, unfortunately. But as you can see, they're very friendly and docile, and they do make fun pets. They are very animated and fun as well. Something interesting about them, their gender when they're born, the sex of their species is determined by the temperature that their eggs were kept at. So that's called the incubation temperature. If their eggs are incubated under 81 degrees or so, anywhere between 72 and 81 degrees, those will all be male. And anything higher, any warmer temperature than 81 will all be female. So that's pretty much true all the time with these turtles, which is another reason we should look more carefully at climate change. There are a lot of animals that incubation temperature can affect the gender of their species. So with climate change and global warming, we might have an issue later on where there are way more female tortoises or turtles than there will be male, and that could cause some population issues as well. Although, like I said, these guys are very invasive. They're kind of notorious for taking over the world through the pet trade and other industries. And they're once they're established in an ecosystem, they're very hard to tame down the numbers. And so I'll give you guys one more close-up look here. I think he just gave you a wink, and you can see his shell is connected. All arms and legs can fit right inside of the shell for protection. You can see his head can completely go inside, and that's how they're able to stay safe. And if you look, he's going to open his mouth here for you. They do not have any teeth. They have a beak-like shape. It's ridges on their jaw, and that's how they're able to chew up leaves and grasses that they might eat, and especially small fish and things like that. So I'll give you a little look in the back here. This is their tail. And yeah, there you go. This is our red-eared slider crush. And here is our final animal of the day. This is Rudy, our Sulcata tortoise. They're also called African spurred tortoises. They originally come from the southern regions of the Sahara Desert. So they are desert animals, as you can see from the camouflage here. They are herbivores. They only eat greens. So he eats fruit, vegetables, hay, and grass. He's a grazer, which is why he's kind of looking around for things to graze on right now. This one, Rudy, weighs about 50 pounds, but they can grow to be up to 100, and they can live very long. They can live up to 80 years, and they start off about the size of a $50 like that, and they can get very big very quickly. So unfortunately, a lot of people get them not knowing how big they're going to get. This is actually how we got Rudy. He was adopted by a family who didn't quite know what they were in for. and gave him to us a few years ago, and he's been growing ever since. Like I said, they live a very long time, and they are natural burrowers. In the wild, they dig very deep, big burrows to stay cool in the Sahara Desert. Here we have a nice, cool spot for him to hang out and a big thing of water to cool off if he would like. You can see these rings here. You can actually count them to see how old they are. They grow with the tortoise, and the shell is made of the same thing that your fingernails are made out of, keratin. And so it is very hard, but does have a little bit of give to it, and it grows with the tortoise, and the tortoise is born with it as well. You'll see these section here. This is used for flipping tortoises over. When they're friendly, they flip each other over, back over to help each other out. But if two males are fighting, the winner is who's able to flip over the other one. You'll see he has big spurs on his legs as well. He's unable to keep his arms and legs inside of his shell, so those protect him on the outside. And similarly, he has tough scales on his head that protect his head as well. He also has a tail. Some people don't know that, so I'll show you guys. There's his tail. And yes, he's a very active tortoise. We like to bring him outside into the sun, and we call him the world's slowest lawnmower. He likes to just kind of mose around and eat all the grass we have out there. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and have a great day.